So let's have a look at some of the nice new features that we've got in the CC version of Premiere. A lot of these are things that I really couldn't live without, and I wouldn't like to go back to using CS6 at all. First of all, they've completely redesigned the timeline. It still works in the same way as it used to, so you basically have an audio and a video clip and they end up on different tracks. If you've got a 5.1 clip like I have here, it's on a separate track to stereo clips. All that works the same, but they've redesigned a lot of the way that this looks. So first of all, I'd like to see the waveforms of this sound, please. And you normally go over to the header here and you click on a little triangle and it will turn up. Well, there's no little triangle. What they do instead is all you do is you grab hold of the bottom and just make the track bigger, and then it shows you the waveform. Make it smaller and eventually the waveform disappears. And obviously you can do that for each individual track. You can make each track as big or as small as you like. There is a nice little option under this spanner. So wherever you see a spanner in Premiere, it probably means there's some settings. And if you click on that, you can see I've got various options, but one of them is this one, expand all tracks. And if I click on that, it actually makes all the tracks bigger, so you can see all the waveforms and the pictures. There's also a minimize all tracks, just to get it down to being a nice condensed display again. But let me expand them all. Now let's zoom in a bit. I'm going to use the plus key. I use plus and minus to zoom in a lot. Although I also use the hold down on Alt and then use the mouse wheel quite a lot these days. But looking at the waveforms here, you can see I've got sound here and obviously it's all over one side, but the waveforms do look different to the way they looked in CS6. These are what they call rectified audio waveforms. Now you can make them look like they did in CS6. There's a setting for that, so you might think, oh, I'll go to the little spanner and the setting will be on there. It isn't, the setting somewhere else. On the timeline, you've got two places where you can set settings for the timeline. One is off the spanner, the other is off the little stack at the top. Why have they split them up? I think basically it's to make sure that the menus don't come out too big. This one, if you hang over it long enough, says it's the timeline display settings. So you think logically that's stuff to do with how things look on the timeline. But in fact, if you click on the little stack up here, there's other stuff here which decides how things look on the timeline as well. So just bear in mind there are two places, and if you can't find an option there, go up there. There's a little stack like that in the corner of every window, and if you click on it, it comes up with stuff specific to the window. So click on it in the bin, it comes up with things you can do for the bin. Click on it on the player, it's stuff to do with the player. I'm heading up here to look for the heading that says rectified audio waveforms. And you see it's ticked, let's untick it, you get back to the waveforms as they used to be. There's another little one next to it which is called logarithmic waveform scaling. Now if I untick that, you'll notice the waveforms get a bit smaller. It just changes the way that the waveforms display slightly. So with the logarithmic waveforms, they don't so much tell you how loud a clip is. I mean, let's go down to this clip down here. I'm going to make the whole track a bit bigger so you can see it a bit more. This is a surround sound clip, and it's quite quiet because all we do is we walk in and sit down. I can just about see a waveform, it's quite quiet. If I turn off logarithmic waveform scaling, I can see it even less. So the logarithmic scaling basically gives you something which lets you see the waveforms a bit better, but they're not telling you so much which are the loud ones and which are the quiet ones. I find it's best basically to leave that one on because it's good enough. I can still see the various waveforms, and I like the rectified waveforms. I find I can find peaks and troughs and bits where I've got some audio I've got to chop out a lot nicer if I use the rectified waveforms as opposed to the non-rectified ones. Other settings you have off of here are things obviously like the start time, so you can make the timeline start at a specific time code if you want to. The work area bar. The work area bar is off by default, but you can bring it back. I have to admit I've got used to living without it. And things like the audio time units, so you can change it from showing frames to showing samples. Those all the same as they were in CS6. The new stuff is things like the rectified audio waveforms and being able to open up the timeline and so on. The headers here can actually be customized. So at the moment I've got all the usual things. You can lock a track, select a track, turn off the track patching, which is all to do with when you insert clips and when you're doing ripple editing. This will disable a track, all those kind of things we had before. On the audio side, we've got two new buttons which are rather nice, mute and solo. So the M, if you click that, will mute that track. So when I play this thing now, I don't hear anything, even though there's some sound there, and I do as soon as it jumped onto the other track. Solo is the opposite, so if I click on the S, that will solo this track, and now this track's the only track I can hear, and you can't hear the others. You can choose to solo 2 tracks if you want to, just by selecting another one. Which is great if you've got lots of different audio tracks and you just want to hear a couple of them together, you can solo the 2 of them. Those are very nice little additions. But I can also add other things in here. So I'm going to head up to the little spanner. I'm going to choose Customize Audio Header. And this gives me all sorts of things that I could actually add in here if I wanted to. So you have things that are actually there already, sync locks, mute and solo. This R will enable it for recording, so I could stick a little R down there. I'm going to drag in the track volume, the balance, and an audio meter. Come out of this, and now you notice that the actual track has changed. If I drag out my other audio track big enough as well, you'll notice I've got the same things on there. You know, I've now got a balance control for the stereo tracks. I've got an audio level meter, so that when I play it back, I can see the audio levels of that particular track. I can increase the entire track volume or decrease it. These were all things we could get to through the track mixer. Let's go up to Window and then choose Audio Track Mixer, and you've got this thing. So when you play it, you get the levels for individual tracks, the overall level, you can change the balance of stereo tracks and that sort of thing. All that kind of stuff can now be put down here. And if the tracks aren't big enough, you simply don't see it. If the tracks are big enough, then you can see it. And you can see I've also got my little R, where I can arm these things for recording. So if I was doing a voiceover, I can tell it which track it's going to go onto from here. Now I clicked on my little R and it's complained that you don't have a microphone plugged in, which is entirely true, because my microphone is currently plugged into another computer recording me talking. All nice little additions.